to This Is My Autism and Me, the podcast by Alfie Blanchflower.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of My Autism and Me. In today's episode, I'm going to go over what I can remember from nursery, reception and year 1. For each year, my mum will also step in and say what she can remember. Heading straight into nursery, there is not that much that I can remember from it. However, I can remember one big panic attack. I can just remember refusing to leave either my mum or dad's arms. This was before we thought it could have been autism or anxiety, so they just thought I was misbehaving. So that is literally all I remember. So here's Mum going over what she can remember from nursery.
Hi, I'm Alfie's mum, Nicola. So Alfie was a very content baby and little boy. He was very easy to keep entertained at home, and to be honest, he played by himself happily. We attended different baby groups and tumble tops. Before Alfie started nursery, he went to playgroup. However, I knew he was too young, but we tried it anyway. On his first morning there, he went in happily, although I'm not sure he knew what was going on, and unfortunately he was bitten by another child quite badly. We tried the next morning, and off he went again. On my way out, I looked over the fence, and he was standing outside the area, and he just looked so lost. So we stopped playgroup. We looked around for schools for Alfie, as I wanted him to go to nursery that was part of the school he would eventually go to, thinking that the transition would be easier. The school nursery teacher said it would be good for him to go to a nursery whilst waiting for a space, so he would find adjusting to nursery easier. A few months later we started another nursery, and Alfie settled in well and was happy to go 3 mornings a week. Finally he got a space at what would be his school nursery, and he started there. Alfie was always cautious about going in, but the staff were great, so reluctantly he'd go every morning. As the weeks went on, Alfie was less happy to go. He was much happier at home. A few times we had tears at dropping off, but nothing too concerning.
Moving on to reception, I can just remember one panic attack where I got into school, hung my coat up and then panicked as I saw my mum leave. I just ran for her. Luckily she heard me and stopped. After that I just remember my teacher telling me to promise her not to run out again in case the fire alarm went off. Other than that, I can just remember getting upset at the end of the day because I would think that it was much closer to home time than it was. That's all I can remember from reception, so here is Mum with what she can remember.
Alfie transitioned to reception, but seemed to struggle with leaving me. His teacher assured me that he was okay once he was in, and some children took longer to adapt, and this was perfectly normal. Some days Alfie would go in fine, and other days he would need to be peeled off me. It felt like a bit of a roller coaster not knowing how Alfie would feel and react, but we just kept trying. His schoolwork was fine, and as we've always been told, he was a pleasure to teach. Because of how difficult Alfie found going into school, some days it was difficult to keep positive. I just wanted to scoop him up in my arms and take him home, but I knew that wouldn't help Alfie. He would have found going in even harder, not understanding why yesterday I took him home, but today he had to go in. So against all my instincts, we kept going to school. The staff were lovely, and my reasons for keeping him home would have been purely selfish. So we talked about all the positives, and I made sure I was positive and confident about him going to school and being in school, although it didn't seem to help. Alfie was labelled a sensitive boy.
Going into year 1, there is the one that I can remember the most clearly out of the 3. I remember one day having such a bad panic attack that I'm pretty sure it ended up with me going home. I just remember sitting outside the classroom in tears with my mum and the class TA, teaching assistant. Now, my year 1 TA was quite abrupt and therefore didn't help that much. I think I was outside for about an hour. I just couldn't calm down and just was so scared. So that is all I remember from year 1, so here is Mum with her point of view.
Being a teaching assistant, I knew year 1 was more about working than learning through play, so a lot of children struggle in year 1. They're not really ready for that kind of schooling, and that's when behaviours seem to emerge. Alfie really struggled with going into school, and it was so awful to see. Some days were better than others, but mostly he'd go in sobbing. Again, I was assured he was fine when he was in class, so we kept going through the daily process of going in. I don't remember Alfie being sent home because he didn't settle, but it is a while ago.
Finally, going on to parent tips.
Don't get angry. No matter how frustrated you are, stay calm and speak less, and listen to your child. It doesn't matter how you're feeling, you can deal with that later. The more you speak, the less your child hears you. A lot of children, when they have panic attacks, can't process what you're saying, so someone who's panicking and speaking more and more can make it worse for your child.
And my tip would be, if you have to go to work, otherwise you could lose your job, then make sure to explain as clearly as possible to your child that you have to go. Just before I go, I want to say, having these panic attacks were really embarrassing. I have something called the imaginary audience, which is the technical name for thinking that everyone is looking and judging you, when in reality they probably think the same as you. I hope you liked this episode, and if you did, if you're listening on YouTube, please leave a like. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. And if you're on Spotify, then do whatever you do on there, because I don't know. See you next week. Bye!
You have been listening to My Autism and Me, the podcast by Alfie Blanchflower.